This is Will Tchakirides interviewing Theron Ike Carter for the HBCU Radio Preservation Project. It is 9:27 a.m. on May 14th, 2024. This interview is being recorded at Savannah State University at the WHCJ station in Savannah, Georgia. All right, Mr. Carter, can you please tell me your full name and what your role was at this station, WHCJ?
My full name is Theron Allen Carter, Jr., and I was station manager here at WHCJ for, I think, 26 years, 27 years. Grace can give you the exact number. I don't remember.
No worries at all.
Yeah.
Well, before we get to your remarkable career here in radio and at WHCJ, let me take it back to the beginning. I want you to tell me when you were born, where you were born, and who the people were who raised you.
I was born in Savannah, Georgia, at Charity Hospital, a historic Charity Hospital, and I was born January 9th, 1941. My mother and my stepfather actually raised me. My mother and my father divorced when I was 2 years old, and she married my stepfather, and so they raised me. You know, my mother mainly. My stepfather kind of never really tried to take an active part in raising. You know, I think that's something about me not being his child. I always knew who my father was, and I always saw my father until he passed away. I think I was in junior high school when he passed away. But I always knew who he was, and it was a situation that I didn't particularly like being a stepchild or having a stepfather, because, you know, kids will tease you about anything, and that used to bother me sometimes when they would, I don't live with my daddy, and your mama's got another man living with her and stuff, but you know how kids are. And being a sensitive kid, that bothered me for a minute or two.
And what were your parents' names?
Elizabeth, she was Elizabeth Glover, was her maiden name. She married my father, of course. That made her Elizabeth Carter. Then when she married my stepfather, she became Elizabeth Reed, and that's R-E-I-D. So, yeah, she was Elizabeth Reed, known throughout Savannah as Liz. But she was she's a great woman. She was a very smart woman, very energetic, and able to do a lot of different things. You know, in fact, my grandmother was too. I had a closer relationship with my grandmother than, because she lived right in South Carolina. I used to have to go stay with her every year.
What was her name?
Daisy Glover. And but I had to spend the summers with her for when I was a little boy, you know, like 6, 7 years old. And I used to hate it because Barnwell, South Carolina was not a big bustling town. It was a small town. And I called it a country because to me it was. But I had such a valuable imprint put on my life by Barnwell, South Carolina, and I didn't even know it at the time, but I really got a lot of there's a lot of things that Barnwell influenced me on that I really didn't realize until I got older how important it was. But I think that's probably where I started to say that's where my love of music began. But
so, tell me a little bit about the landscape in Barnwell and how did it compare to Savannah growing up?
Well, first of all, dirt roads, no street lights, no radio. I mean, the radio station, they didn't have a local radio station, so we listened to the radio. I used to love to listen to baseball games because baseball, next to music, baseball was my greatest love. And it was, if you wanted to go anywhere in Barnwell, you walked. Very few people that I knew had automobiles. I had a cousin who had a truck, and then my cousins that lived right across the road from my grandmother had a horse and wagon. They had a farm. They had a lot of children. I had about 10 children, 9 or 10 children. And
did you have siblings?
I had a sister. She passed away 3 years ago, I think it was.
What was her name?
Helen Dolores Carter. But she was almost 2 years older than me, and so we it was always, and my family called me brother. So whenever we would go like to Barnwell or anything, they would always say Helen and brother. They always put us together.
And were you nicknamed Ike at an early age?
No, actually, I was nicknamed Ike when I was in junior high school. I guess they call it middle school now. But at the time, I ran for president of the student council, and I won. So Dwight Eisenhower was president of the country, and guys in my class started calling me Little Ike, and it kind of stuck. When I went to college at Howard University, nobody could pronounce my name correctly. They would call me Theron, all kinds of names. So I said, well, just call me Ike, and so therefore, if you go to D.C., everybody knows Ike Carter. A lot of people don't even know my name.
It's a unique name, Theron. Where does that come from? Do you know?
Well, I'm a junior, but it's Greek. I looked it up. It's Greek and means a hunter. And I had a friend when I was a freshman in college named Theodolisus. He was from Greece, and so we used to talk about my name. He was good at math too. He used to help me out a lot. But yeah, that's Ike is it's been with me so long. I don't
Okay, well, we'll get to Howard. So tell me, I want to know a little bit more about the place you grew up. Tell me what Savannah was like as a child.
We were a segregated city, but not as bad as some. Actually, black people had a somewhat of an insulated society because we had to fend for ourselves. We had our own everything. We had our own businesses. We had our own bank. We had theaters, restaurants. All that was back. There was what is now Martin Luther King Boulevard was at the time when I grew up West Broad Street, and that was the main street, and there was a lot of West Broad Street was alive, a lot of things going on, and there was one corner, West Broad and Gaston Street, is like 125th and Lenox Avenue in New York, because it was like a gathering place. And I mentioned about Merchant Marine. When people would come from, go away and come back, they gathered at West Broad and Gaston Streets on the corner. A lot of knowledge passed on from a lot of knowledge. People would learn things and bring it back, and and naturally, having traveled, you always thought that you were hipper than somebody else. Always always wanted to know more than other people, and you took pride in that. Especially,
Savannah. Sorry to interrupt. Savannah was a port city, right? How did being a port city shape the community that you grew up in?
Well, first of all, there was a merging of cultures because of the Sea Islands. There was the Gullah culture that was always here. It was Geechee when I was, and now they call it Gullah Geechee, but it's mainly the people who lived on the Sea Islands, who were most of them were descendants of people from Sierra Leone, who were brought here to because they knew how to grow rice and to grow indigo. This is stuff that I learned later in life because we were never taught this in school, that actually people who were enslaved were brought here because they had skills. They just didn't, the story used to be, pluck us out of the trees. They had societies and they had skills. And so the Gullah people were, as I said, it was always Geechee to me. I learned Gullah when I first came back home, but Geechee was the term that we used, and it was not really an endearing term because a lot of times we were thought about the difference in that the Geechee people or Gullah people were somehow different, and that's another thing that always was a problem until we started to learn that we're all the same, basically, after the exterior societies and exterior ways and that we learn but I got a really good understanding of specifically about the Gullah culture and Sierra Leone because there was a troupe of Sierra Leonean players who came through Savannah. They came to Savannah State, actually, and the leader of the group was named Charlie Hoffner, and I did an interview with him on the radio station, and he talked a lot about the similarities and the connection between the Gullah people and the people of Sierra Leone, and words that I'd heard as a little boy. He tied them up with, like, I remember people around me always calling turtles kudas, and that's a Sierra Leonean word for turtle. So that's a history. Opened my ears and my mind to trying to learn more about all of the cultures.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit, when you're living in a city where the legal system is Jim Crow,
yeah,
in the realms of education, in the home, at work, how did your community, Black Savannah, survive that experience, and how did you resist it as well?
Well, I speak from my own experience, which is not necessarily everybody's experience, but I know everybody who were my peers. We had great teachers. We had great teachers from the first grade. My first grade teacher was Miss Gertie Thomas, and she was a living legend. People used to change their addresses to move to the east side so that they could go to East Broad Street School and be taught by Gertie Thomas. So she was a legendary teacher, and I remember a lot of my teachers who made a really big impression on me. Miss Harper from elementary school. From middle school. She was my homeroom teacher in the 8th grade. Miss Stella J. Reeves, who taught me history at Beach High School, and she was probably my favorite teacher because she thought I was a genius, and by that time I started to think so too. But you can't help. But Miss Reeves was actually, she was great, and she fill us in on a lot of things that weren't a part of the curriculum, that there was this alter curriculum that black teachers had, that they will go outside of the box to teach us and expose us to.
Yeah, why was that important?
Well, because in retrospect, it really opened our ears to something else, opened our minds to another point of view, about us, about Savannah. My love of music was given to me in the cradle. From the cradle on, I can always remember being in love with music. But in elementary school, we were being taught about Stephen Foster, and that he was a great American composer. He wrote songs like Old Black Joe and Masters in the Cold, Cold Ground. But we had that was in the books, textbooks. But when I got to high school, I was 13 years old when I started high school. But I had a teacher, Mr. Raymond Washington, who was a biology and chemistry teacher, and he also was a so-called jazz fanatic. When Mr. Washington used to bring his records to school in a little jukebox, little record player, and he would at lunch period he would play his play music for us, the music of Charlie Parker and Duke Ellington, Dizzy Gillespie, so he would play that music, and it was something that, and he also used to teach us facts about the music, how we created that music as a people, and other people, white people were trying to steal it, try to usurp it, and that. But it was something that was created by African American musicians, and it comes directly out of the African culture from Africa to the mainland. It's directly out of the blues, which the blues, the first form of American music, African American music, was of course the Negro spirituals. And even before that, the field hollers and work songs that people sang when they worked to lighten the load, to make music, made it go easier, and that evolved into to the blues, which actually is the most influential music form, in my opinion, of the 20th century, because it's influenced music all over the world. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, everybody, Frank Sinatra, everybody, was influenced by the blues, and so-called jazz comes directly out of the blues.
So this lineage, this cultural memory, was taught to you by black teachers outside of the regular curriculum in school. This was something that was passed down.
Yeah, it was, and it was not, the lessons were not just taught by the teachers. They were taught by extended, not extended family. I guess you could call them extended family to a degree. But other older people who also liked the music would amplify what Mr. Washington was doing, and with us in school. But he just made such an impression on me because. He had a lot of music, and he actually influenced me in how I would later present my radio programs, because I always wanted to give the people the information, not just play the music, but to let them know that the music had a deeper meaning than just some form of entertainment. And it's so that was always been very important to me.
And was music on in your household growing up? Was Mrs. Glover playing records?
Music was always there, whether at Miles, because we had the radio. We would listen to the music on the radio.
What stations?
there was a couple of stations that used to play, and I was always interested in a lot of instrumental music. But then they got a black station in Savannah called WJIV, and it played they played a lot of blue, Elmore James and Jimmy Reed and Big Joe Turner, great blues singers, and so it was. And just to diverse a little bit, there was at one time, we were taught that the blues was. Some people tried to teach us that the blues was somehow not proper music. It wasn't sophisticated. It wasn't, and in fact, a lot of black people would teach you that, and always because there was this wall built up between black secular music and popular music and music of the black church, and when in essence, as I learned somewhat later in life, it's all the same thing. It's all the same, and it's all from it comes from I think it's driven by a need to have some kind of release. The blues gave you. I heard my wife went to a National Association of Education. They had it over on the island, and she was telling me I missed this great sermon by this guy who was talking about the juke joint and the church. How the juke joint served the same purpose as the church. The juke joint had the blues. The church had spiritual music, not gospel, because gospel comes much later. Pardon me. But and how he said that how the preacher was saying that, or the speaker, I don't even know if he was a minister, but he was saying that the music accomplished the same purpose in two different venues, the juke joint and the church. And after, at that time we were just working hard all week and working hard, and then you go to church, you go to juke joint on Saturday night, and for release, and they would be getting down, and then you go to church on Sunday morning for the same kind of release and relief. And there used to be this joke that, you can tell the difference in, pardon me, church music and blues are black popular music, because you see people would be with popular music, they would be moving up and down, jumping, like dancing, and then church music or religious music, it moves from side to side. And it's after I learned more about the elements of our music, the African elements, call and response, and polyrhythms, that's a part of all of our music, and that comes directly from Africa.
Thank you for that. Now, you're talking about the juke joints in Savannah. Did you ever see live music performed as a young person?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had to sneak in a lot when I got over, like at high school. My friends and I would sneak in. Then when we got to college, when I would come home in the summer, we would go. But, because I mentioned Highway 17 before, was a thoroughfare from Miami to Boston. And thoroughfare is probably not the right word, but it was a main route. And it came through Savannah. So we used to see a lot of national acts because they would come through Savannah and, pardon me, they would do, they would come through Savannah, and a lot of times they would take a gig that wasn't a main gig, just something to make some extra money, and that's where we would get to see them. Duke Ellington came through Savannah. In fact, Duke Ellington was in Savannah for a gig, a date, engagement, and somebody was showing him around Savannah, and I was in the band in high school. We were out front of Beach High School.
What did you play?
I played trumpet. I had a trumpet, and I played E-flat mellophone as well. But I never had the dedication to be a musician. But it still gave me a knowledge, whereas I never became a musician, but I knew when it was done right. And it develops your ability to hear the final points in music. But anyhow, they brought Duke Ellington down, and he drove him down where we were practicing, and everybody, we surrounded the car, naturally, and there he was. The first time I ever saw anybody with an aura. He was shining, like a bright light, and I was maybe 14 years old, 14, 15.
Where did he play, do you remember?
At the Flamingo. There was a venue called the Flamingo, and they used to get a lot of people coming, entertainers coming through town, and they would, like on a Tuesday night or Wednesday, an off night, because they could get them, and the musicians could make a little money, and we could see some really great music.
And who would I see at the Flamingo when Duke Ellington's performing? Is that an integrated venue?
No, not at that time. It was there were no integrated venues. Unless there was a jam session or something, once in a while you see a couple of white musicians who would come in. But it wasn't publicized and wasn't out because, segregation was the law of Georgia, law of the South. So, they would come in. We still used to see, they had other venues like the Lincoln Inn and the Coconut Grove, and they would have... they would book regular dances and stuff, and people, great musicians who were not household names at that time, like B.B. King and James Brown and Bobby Blue Bland. They would be, that's when they had the dances at these clubs. But Flamingo was a wonderful venue because they had... At the time that the Flamingo opened, I was a little older, so I was able to sneak out sometimes, and I could get into to see the musicians because it was it was wonderful. We never had a scarcity of great music, and then when I discovered records, that was even better.
Before we move forward, tell me a little bit about what the racial and ethnic composition of Savannah is actually like. Is it a majority black city at this time in the 50s?
Oh yeah, I think it was like probably 40, almost 50%, maybe 48, okay. 49, 47%. They never told us the truth about it. Always skewed the numbers, but the influence was there.
And you mentioned it's a more liberal city than others in the South or other locations, more rural locations. What did it mean to be a liberal city government in the South?
Well, the government wasn't liberal. It's just the practices and the people, the attitude of the people. You still had some people who were mean, bona fide racists, but then again, you had some who were not as bad.
So when it's not that hardcore segregationist reaction, what does that look like? What does liberal prejudice look like in that way? Is there an example?
It's like it's not like somebody just browbeats you with prejudice, but then in somewhat subtle ways, because sometimes things would be said that would be insulting to you, but they weren't like said in a way that were insulting and threatening, if that makes sense. But and it was almost like you were invisible. At sometimes people would make comments about things that really, when you thought about them, they were really they were meant to hurt, but it was a paradox because they weren't like the segregationists. They weren't said deliberately to hurt, but sometimes people would just there was no reason for them to white people. There was no reason for them to hold their tongues, so they would say anything.
And how did that feel for you personally?
Well, it left scars on me that it took me a long time, and I think I finally started to, you told something all your life, and then even though it's not really true, there's a part of it that will that still hangs on to you, that still gets into your psyche, and so it's almost like you've heard it so much, and it's been browbeaten into you so much that you start to believe it a little bit. That I'm not as good. And I had a teacher one time told me that told his class that he would rather be white. This is a black teacher teaching his high school, and said he was proud of Jackie Robinson and Joe Louis and other great black people. He said, but I'd rather be. And he said this to me in the class. Nobody told me this. He said that to me, but we just put him down as being he was educated, but he was ignorant. I never quite got over that,
Did you feel safe growing up?
I felt safe because we more or less knew where to stay. There were things that you couldn't, like the street I live on now, I probably couldn't walk down when I was, and I didn't live that far from the street when I was growing up. It's, maybe 10 or 12 blocks, but there were certain places that white people were for whites only and didn't have signs or anything, but you knew that you weren't supposed to be there. And then if the police came, they naturally they ready to beat up on you.
Did you ever encounter police aggression?
No. I think I didn't, because you learn how to navigate without putting yourself in that position, because we knew that policemen could kill you, beat you, or whatever. Nothing would be done to them. So that's not new. That's something that's any black person my age or older knows that was that's what the deal was, as they say. So you forewarned is forearmed. So we because you had no wind, so you didn't go out looking for trouble, even until they until the civil rights movement. And I was away when the civil rights movement started in Savannah. I was at Howard. I was in D.C. But my friends were here, and they and it's hard to explain how you can see like something like a great burden being rolled away right in front of your eyes, and people start to emerge and not be concerned about the prejudice, but concerned about moving ahead. And you saw it, in the 60s. I'm very fortunate in that I got to live in the 60s, because the 60s actually started in 1958 with the Brown versus Board of Education decision by the Supreme Court. And it was like it kind of lifted a barrier on black yes, we can do this now, and things are going to get better. Because we've been hearing that all a while, but
So what did that feel like when all of a sudden, the dream of liberation was a possibility? So what did it feel like for you navigating a world that you had known and going forward?
From 1958, when I left Savannah, I lived away until I moved back in 1988. I lived away for like 30 years. And I was living in Washington, D.C. mostly. Even though when I first started in D.C., D.C. was still segregated. Not to the degree that, the South, but it was...
Well, okay, tell me your first impressions of D.C. when you moved there. You went there for school, right?
Yes. First of all, I mean, I have to say with all honesty that the first thing that impressed me about D.C. and Howard University is that they had so many pretty girls. That just knocked me out because I never seen. I mean, we all have pretty girls in Savannah, but I never seen so many at one time. But anyhow, I also was impressed by Howard University and the diversity of people, African Americans and African Caribbeans, and who were at Howard, and gave me a whole nother aspect on what was happening, and it was like I always thought that I was really smart, and when I got to Howard, I found out there are a multitude of people who are smart and smarter than me, So, but that was, and the things that I learned from just interacting with my peers. We used to talk about a lot of things in the dorm. I lived in it was a brand new dormitory. In fact, they didn't have a name for it. They called it New Men's Dormitory, and it became Drew Hall, named it after Dr. Charles Drew. But they had all of the youngest students, freshman students, freshman male students, living in Drew Hall, and it was 5 floors. On the 5th floor, they had the youngest among. They had like the 16 and 17 year olds, people who were young students who were in the honors program, and so the 5th floor was something. It was amazing to me because there was so many young people who had another whole nother bundle of how shall I say, they had a lot of different ideas and different points of view that I had not shared with a lot of people before, and we found out that while some of them were different, a lot of them were the same as I was growing up in Georgia. In fact, they used to think that if you were from Georgia, you were a country bumpkin. And one of the things that everybody in college at Howard, you wanted to be hip. That means aware of what's going on. And a lot of the, especially students from New York and Philly, always they liked so-called jazz, and they knew about it. And when I came here from Georgia, they found out that I knew more than they did about the music, about the finer points of the music. And that was because of Mr. Washington and Beach High School and what I had been exposed to in his class.
When you were in high school, was the arts and music your favorite subject, or did you enjoy another subject as well, other subjects?
Well, basically, I enjoyed all the subjects. I liked mathematics and geometry. I liked physics. I liked chemistry. I liked well, you took band lessons. I like the band, and I liked one subject I made myself not like, and I hated it, is because was English. But then I learned to like English because I found out how important it was that you couldn't succeed, especially in college, unless you had a good English background. So, but basically, the science courses, history was always fascinated me as well. American history, world history, and I always enjoy reading about certain aspects of history.
And and then and when you attended Howard, how did that expand and open up your horizons in terms of literature and history? What did it transform inside of you?
Well, it made the desire to know more, because there was so much more. I got particularly interested in Russian history, and I guess it was from reading the books and and humanities novels that you had to read, which I never took humanities, but my peers took humanities, and it was like I learned from them what about what's the Crime and Punishment?
Okay, so Dostoevsky and some of the great Russian authors.
Yeah, and it was so. I've always, since that time, I've enjoyed reading about Russia and Russian life.
Did you get interested in Russian working class history or its communist history at all?
Well, pardon me. I learned. I got into the brothers Karamazov. I got into, and then I got into the history, Lenin and Marx, and because Howard had a very liberal curriculum, which was, and when I say liberal, I mean as far as the subject matter. They based it on the Howard's curriculum on the Ivy League schools, and so it was. But yeah, I enjoyed reading about. I remember reading about some of the great struggles of the Russian people, and and really that was one of my main points of interest in history. I like the ancient history. I like modern history as well. But
as you're learning these new histories at Howard and expanding your knowledge base, how did it change how you thought about your hometown of Savannah? Did you think differently about, say, working class life, or what the culture of Savannah was like in any way?
I never connected the two, so to speak. I never saw one as opposed to the other, Savannah as opposed to other cultures. That would come later in life after I got a chance to travel some, and see. But I never thought that our experiences, I never correlated them with the experiences of the Russian working class or the French working, the French Revolution. I never saw them side by side.
Or even in D.C., what you were seeing and learning in D.C.
Yeah, well, D.C. was more of a sophisticated society to me. D.C. also brought out something that was prevalent among African American people. And we were told we were colored at the time, and then we were Negroes, and then but one thing that stood out was that you were not, and I kind of lost my thought, but one thing that
I think you're talking about Black DC and
yeah,
what it was like.
well, thank you. That was a memory gate that opened it right up. DC, there was as much prejudice among us against other black people as you could find. The whole caste system that was installed based on light skin and dark skin black people.
And it was still a segregated city at that time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it was in our society we used to call that phenomena color struck, where we were people. People will always be talking about being light skinned, with good hair, and that was a thing that used to always bother me because I had cousins on the whole spectrum of color, from the darkest midnight to the brightest sunlight. But there are some people who just thought that being light skinned made them better than other black people.
And that was the first time you're really experiencing colorism within the black community. It was in DC?
Well, no, I first experienced it in Savannah.
Okay.
And you don't think about it at the time, but when you're in elementary school or junior high school or high school, a lot of times choice assignments, if you will, would go to the lighter skinned students if they were having programs, plays. There would be a lot of times they would just pick the person because they were light skinned.
Tell me a bit more about the significance of that in Washington D.C. and describe a bit more about what Black Washington was like.
Well, Washington society really, as I first knew it, was basically that was a driving point was color. In the churches. And nobody would stand up and admit it, but it was. You could see it because you experienced it every day. I know that I got breaks sometimes just because some doors opened because I was light-skinned, but I also knew that I was smart enough to handle it. But I knew some light-skinned people who were not smart enough, but they got in anyhow. They got picked to do stuff that were not that smart, really. They were not qualified, if you will, for whatever we were going for. I remember in high school, there's a young lady who was in high school with me. Her name was Bernice Pinckney, and she was very smart. And we got a national award one time that was given for. They used to do these weekly readers and they would have tests and everything. So Bernice and I think the name of the medal was the Charles Palmer Davis Medal, but we got it. It was Bernice and myself. Now Bernice was a lot darker than me, and I was a lot lighter than she was, but she was really smart, and that I loved it because in my yearbook they had this picture of us getting the award, and it was a national award. It wasn't given. Now, if it had been given by locally by Beach or somebody else, I guarantee you she probably would not have won. They may have found a way to exclude her because she was dark skinned, and that's and that used to bother me too. I thought about it a lot because like I knew firsthand that some of these people who were getting breaks and some of them who were being excluded should have been flip-flopped because that ain't got nothing to do with if you're smart or not, if you got some sense, or if you can do the work. We do problems.
Got you. Thank you so much for that. Tell me also a little bit about how your appreciation and love of jazz evolved and grew in DC?
But so much more exposure. And here I had a few peers who, in fact, there were more than a few, maybe, just to put a number on it, eight. I had some couple of friends, maybe 5 or 6, and there were more, I'm sure, but just my immediate friends who loved the music, and we used to get together and play music. But in D.C. there was more, and they always had different experiences, and a lot of them had seen, a lot of the musicians that I admired so much, they had already seen them perform, even as young people, because there was so much available in New York, Philly, or Chicago.
And would you go out to shows in those cities or in D.C.? What were some of the venues you would attend?
Well, the Carter Barron Amphitheater, I went to a lot. They had a couple of local places, and for the life of me, I don't remember a lot of them, but they were like, but it was like the Hollywood Club, there was this club on Rhode Island Avenue that we used to go to, and I did.
And would some of these be on U Street? I know that was called Black Broadway back in the day. Was
that
a space to see
U
jazz?
Street, the clubs I went to on 9th Street, which is right around the corner from U. Like U Street runs perpendicular to 9th Street.
Right.
And and then there was I forgot. I'm trying to think of this club that featured Latin music, and they would dance. And being exposed to Kiss from New York, I got it really exposed to Latin music. I really loved it. I had this buddy Milton Gittins from the city, from New York, and we used to listen together to a lot of Mongo Santa Maria and Willie Bobo. So my music taste expanded because they exposed me. Different students would expose me to things that I had not heard before. I remember this friend of mine from Chicago, Doug Andrews, was telling me about Ornette Coleman before I had heard of Ornette Coleman. And when I heard Ornette Coleman, in fact, he asked me, had I heard Ornette? And usually among young aficionados, all you need is name as a first name. But he was saying Ornette, and I thought he was saying Arnett, which would be Arnett Cobb, who was a tenor saxophonist from Texas. But Ornette Coleman, Ornette Coleman was one of the great deviations in the path of the music. Ornette Coleman created something entirely different, and a new way of thinking.
So literally, jazz is changing in form as you're attending school and living in D.C.
All the time. In fact, it's a living entity because it's always changing. And if you follow the true tenets of the music, if it doesn't change, then it's not African American classical music or AKA jazz. If you hear the same thing every time a musician plays something, if he plays the same song the same way, then he's playing something else. The music has to change. It has to grow. It has to expand. It has to challenge you. And that's what Ornette Coleman was doing. He challenged the mind. Guys like Cecil Taylor, they were not your run-of-the-mill continuation of the same thing. And I think that started with Thelonious Monk. I think Thelonious Monk started a lot of musicians thinking in a different direction and even though his music was constructed just like regular standard 32 bar tunes, but he was the way that he played his music, the way that he phrased it, the way that he sang it out to you, man. He was, to me, Thelonious Monk was actually the standard bearer for the avant-garde. And musicians have always debated me, musicians that I know, my age group, and they always, one in particular, who's a good friend, but he told me that Monk's music was standard. I say there's nothing standard about Thelonious Monk.
Yeah, would he, if you had to create a big four of your favorite jazz musicians, would he be on there, and who else would be on there?
Well, I start with the masters. I think that Louis Armstrong is probably the greatest because he was the first. Louis Armstrong changed the course of the music. And when he came on the scene, everybody started playing like Louis Armstrong. The piano players, the saxophone, everybody was playing Louis Armstrong. And then after Louis Armstrong was Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker started another new way of thinking. Charlie Parker was the next fountainheads, I call them. And after Charlie Parker was John Coltrane. Because all of these musicians took the music in another direction, took what had come before and what was there, and took it in another direction. And then of course Duke Ellington. You had to put Duke Ellington in there because
we're gonna have to expand this.
Yeah, he I mean for 50 years this man kept his band together because his band was really his instrument. He wrote music for his band. He was a pianist, but his band was his instrument. And then, of course, my favorite musician of all time is Miles Davis.
I was going to say.
I love him because Miles was at the forefront of change in the music for 50 years. He started with Bird and Diz and bebop. He was the principal mover in the late 40s. He started to collaborate with Gil Evans, and then in the 50s he changed what they were calling cool jazz. I hate this terminology with people. I don't know. It's either good or it's not. I don't need all these labels. But then Miles of the 50s, he had probably the greatest small group ever, and that's my opinion because and that's saying a lot. But then John Coltrane developed his music in Miles Davis's, and Miles gave him the space and the room to create his music. And then Miles was one of the first musicians in the genre to accept and embrace hip hop. And hip hop, as if you one of the things about my generation is that a lot of people in my generation discarded hip hop, turned their backs on it. And I think the main reason was because the early and hip hop is. I need to specify that hip hop is not a music. Hip hop is a lifestyle, is a culture. The music is rap, neo soul. That's the music of the hip hop generation. In fact, rap is the hip hop generation's blues. But a lot of my generation turned their backs on it because a lot of the early musicians started. They were using profanity for the sake of being profane, not to make artistic points. Now, profanity has always been in our music to make artistic points, especially the blues, but not just one curse word after the other, just for the sake of being profane. And that's when some of the hip-hop artists became just entertainers. Artists remain true to their art form. Entertainers just trying to make a buck, and they would do anything, to make whatever somebody else is telling them to do. This is what will sell.
I'm curious, did any women composers or jazz musicians or blues musicians catch your attention?
Oh yeah, a bunch of them. When it comes to vocalists, I think women have been the greatest vocalists in the idiom.
Who did you admire?
Sarah Vaughan. Sarah Vaughan is my absolute favorite. Sarah Vaughan, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, and Dinah Washington. To me, are the big four. But then you have Nancy Wilson, who's also great. Carmen McRae. But most of the great, in fact, there have been far more great female vocalists than male vocalists. The females own it. And then other musicians as well. Mary Lou Williams has always been Mary Lou Williams was writing band arrangements for the Andy Kirk Band when she was 16 years old. She was a mentor to a lot of musicians. Thelonious Monk, Dizzy Gillespie, Art Blake, a lot of them. And then now today, actually, with the younger musicians, there are so many bad ladies, and bad is a colloquial term from
meaning in a positive way.
Yeah, bad means it it's good and can't get no better, that. And sometimes I revert to the language of musicians because I've been around them so long. And that I used to do this on my radio program as well. I talked like I was talking to another musician. Not technically, I'm not a musician. I never claimed to be, but on the other hand, I always thought that I could hear as well as anybody else, musician or not.
Did you know of a vocalist in D.C. named Maria Rodriguez by any chance?
No.
Okay. I was curious.
What did she sing?
I think she performed in jazz clubs. I know she was influenced by Mongo Santa Maria, as you mentioned, the percussionist, Cuban percussionist.
Mongo was not just a Cuban percussionist. He was a bad dude, man. He and Chano Pozo, who brought the Cuban rhythms, Afro-Cuban rhythms into this art form. Chano Pozo and Dizzy Gillespie invented, if you will, so-called Afro-Cuban, so-called jazz.
And so it's a really, you're in D.C. and you're experiencing a more cosmopolitan, international blackness, right?
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
How is your time living and learning in Washington D.C. expanding your view of blackness?
There was so many ways that it's hard to express, but by learning about Afro-Cuban music or Latin music or Haitian music, Puerto Rican music is like Afro-Cuban, but I mean you have
the diaspora is all kind of coming together.
Yeah, it's all coming together, and it's all coming back together from, like I know John Hendricks did this album called History of the Blues, and he has this one song he calls Some Got Off the Boat, and it referred to some of the African people who were brought here, got off in different countries, in South America and the islands, and they all developed their own Afro Jamaican, Afro-Cuban, Afro-Puerto Rican, Afro everything, man. In fact, if you look realistically and honestly, all of the music of this diaspora, what's the word I'm looking? Anyway, all of the music of this of Americas, the Americas. Hemisphere is what I was looking for. All the music of this hemisphere was dominated by African music, all of it. And I don't say that and have to duck. I mean, you check it out. Like I used to tell my students, don't take my word for it. Check it out, because I'm not going to tell you a lie. And I was there. It's not like I read about this. I was right in the mix. I was there. Anyhow, But so it expanded my understanding of how that music was really, in my opinion, the first world music. And then after I got into other forms from other countries like Indian music, or back to African music, which cross fertilize, and it's hard to put a pin in that African music because there's some 2,000 different cultures in Africa, with their unique musical styles. So you can't just say that it's African music. Is either Kenyan music or music from Mali, which is strong influences on the blues, the music of North Africa. It's that's one of it's expanding my mind so much because the more I learned about it, the more I listened to it, and that's where your knowledge comes from. That's where your understanding comes from. It comes from listening to the music.
Yeah, and what's amazing is that we can see that the diversity of black music and the world imprint on the program schedule here at WHCJ. So let me transition us a little bit. I want to know when you started working in radio, right? Was it at Howard? Was it at your first job? And tell me where you developed that interest, and give me a little bit of the journey to your first early career in radio.
Well, the first experience with radio actually came from Morgan State University, WEAA in Morgan State. When I lived in Baltimore for 5 years, but just before I moved back home when I was working for Hubline. But at Morgan State, at Baltimore, I became a member of the Left Bank Jazz Society.
You also joined the military. Was this before or after you joined the military?
Oh, this was after I joined the military.
So I guess before we even get to Morgan State, just tell us as concisely as you can about your time in the military, which branch and where you served.
I was in the Air Force for 4 years. I got a discharge honorably in 1965. I went in 68. And there another place that expanded my knowledge because I met guys from all over the world, who had been all over the world and who were from all over the country, and so they brought another perspective on the music as well. And once again, we was like we found each other, and through the music. I have some stories about. I remember the first time I ever heard Johnny Hartman sing. Johnny Hartman is my favorite male vocalist, and he had this album out with John Coltrane, and the only time John Coltrane had a vocalist with him. But it was so beautiful. I was on the way to back to my dorm. My barracks, not my dorm. I'm not in the school now. I'm in the Air Force. But I saw this friend of mine named Reuben Arnold, and he had this album. He was going down to the service club to play it on the record player because he didn't have a record player. So I said, "Where are you going?" It was a snowstorm. Actually, it was snowing, and so he said, "I'm going down to hear this. Listen to this album I just got, John Coltrane and Johnny Hartman." So we went down to the service club and played it. Knocked me out, man. I thought I'd never heard anything so beautiful from John Coltrane and from Johnny Hartman. It was amazing, and it was really good because later in life in D.C., I met Johnny Hartman several times and got to talk to him. In fact, at a conference in Chicago, I got to sit down and listen to some music with him. And because when I used to go to conferences with Hubline, we always had a hospitality suite, and I always take my tapes, and I always seemed to be a center of attention because I do say that I had some good music.
And where were you based for the Air Force?
In the Air Force, in Washington, D.C. at Andrews Air Force Base. I joined the Air Force. I thought I was going to see Europe, but not to be. And when I went to basic training, they started calling out assignments. They were sending people in my flight to France, to England. I said, well, I guess they're going to call me soon. And then they started sending them to stateside assignments, like up on top of a mountain in Washington State, I said, damn, man, I don't want to go there. And then it finally got to me and said, Carter, Washington, D.C. I said, yeah, I'm going home, so that was cool.
And did serving in the military change your understanding about race or anything, working for the federal government? Did that shift anything at all?
Well, and the Air Force, I guess was not, I don't know, I have no experience with other branches. I had friends who were in other branches, but in the Air Force, they still, it was, they had some racists and they had some people who weren't. But it has, and that's the only way I can put it. It's
so not too different.
They couldn't be outwardly racist because that wasn't the service. The Air Force. But stuff like denying promotions and doing stuff.
Right.
It's not so subtle, really. I say subtle, but it's not so subtle. But basically, Air Force I enjoyed because I met a lot of good friends. Got a lot of trouble. I was young and wild, But yeah.
Okay, so let's so after you got out of the Air Force, how did you get into radio? Was there a transition, or did it take a little time?
It was a little time. I started, and after I got out of the Air Force, I worked at the Pentagon for 3 years. For the Air Force, I worked for the Air Force at the Pentagon.
What was your position in the Pentagon?
Well, it was document control, and you used to see a lot of stuff come through the top secret stuff. So I'm really, I still have reservations about discussing that stuff because,
Okay.
You never know who's listening, and I wouldn't do anything anyhow. But yeah, but that was 3 years that I spent at the Pentagon. When I got out of the Pentagon, I actually was an apprentice meat cutter for Safeway International on F Street in D.C. And then after Safeway, I was working for this liquor store part time, and that was and I had a roommate. When I got out of the Air Force, I had homeboys, 5. There was 4 of them, and one of me made 5, and they were all from Georgia. 3 of them were from Savannah, 1 was from Augusta. So I kind of moved in,
The Georgia house.
Yeah, the Georgia house, it always got to be legendary. They used to bring the tour buses by down the street. So yeah, that's where they live, right over there. But, that's a joke. But no. So we, one of my roommates was working for a local distributor, Capital City Liquor Company, and after the riots of 1968 in D.C., there was a certain need to hire black salesmen because white salesmen were afraid to go in the hood, in the ghetto, and that's where a lot of the liquor stores were. So anyhow, his company, he was working for Capital City, and he recommended me to Capital City, and so I got hired, and I worked for Capital City for 12 years. And then I had a friend who worked for Hubline, and I had met a lot of people who represented the distilleries, and I always wanted to do that because it's like a cut above a distributor salesman. So this guy I knew named Jim Beeman recommended me to Hubline, and I was hired there. And
that's they produce spirits.
Oh yeah, they produced Jose Cuervo tequila. They imported Jose Cuervo. Smirnoff vodka was their biggest seller at the time. They had black and white scotch. They had arrow cordials, say a whole full line of spirits. Yeah, and I worked for Hugh Blind for 8 years.
Okay. I just want to step back for a second. You mentioned the 1968 riots after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in D.C. What do you remember about that week? That day, that week, those few days,
Well,
National Guard called in.
I remember going down on Howard University's campus because I heard that there was going to be a rally, and there wasn't students out, and Stokely Carmichael was at the rally. He spoke at the rally, and he was, they killed the wrong one now, and he was, anyhow, that was a Friday, and Friday night, it all broke loose. Things started happening, and then and I was riding around, and with a friend of mine, he had a van. And we were riding around town in the riot, and it looked like to me like pictures of World War II, with the buildings burning and flames everywhere. That was quite. It wasn't. It was. I got to say, it was. It should have been expected, because. Within a period of several years, Martin Luther King was killed, Malcolm X was killed, Medgar Evers, Bobby Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. A lot of assassinations that people wanted us to believe were coincidences. I never believed that. But anyhow, that's neither here nor there, because there's nothing you can say about it now. But everybody was. People were angry. They were angry. It's like here's a man of peace that this man shot James Earl Ray. They said, even though I think that's anyhow. I don't want to get into conspiracies and stuff, but I have my own thoughts about that. But yeah, it was awful, man. It was people who were ordinarily not doing those kinds of things, and breaking windows and breaking into stores. But one thing that was kind of unique was that they drew a line down like at K Street that separates downtown from all the businesses, the white businesses, the stores and stuff, bank, and the federally lips. Huh?
A police line?
Well, no, the police was military.
Okay, the guard.
And because they brought the military in because that was D.C. Then for some time after that, 2 weeks, they had military was patrolling the streets in the black neighborhoods, and to keep it separated from the people who were raising hell.
Do you see that frustration, the anger, and setting fire, looting, what have you? Do you see that as a form of legitimate protest?
Well, I don't. I'm not the unlawful type. That's not my persona. However, I understand.
Yeah.
The frustration of things just happening over and over, and you being told one thing. I understand. I never participated, even though I was out among. I could have been, if I had been stopped or anything, I probably would have lost my job because I was still working at the Pentagon. But I couldn't. Now I understand. I was mad.
Yeah, how did you feel?
I was mad as hell, man, because I was in the Air Force when JFK was shot. I remember I was going to Malcolm Grove Hospital on sick call, and a friend of mine I saw came in to tell me the president just got shot. And I thought he was bullshitting, pardon me, but I thought he was just, because he was a jokester. But he said, no, the president was shot in Dallas. And so that was, and then Bobby Kennedy was killed. I don't know if that's chronological order, but then Medgar Evers was killed. Malcolm X was killed. Martin Luther King, and it was like people. You know Bob Marley's music.
Mm-hmm.
There's a line from us. I forgot the song is now, but how long will they kill our prophets while we stand aside? That's
And look.
yeah, and look, and it's so. I mean, it's and people who have not been under that kind of pressure, under that kind of hate, and might not understand, but they don't want to understand because they just it's impossible to understand unless you live as a black man for a black woman for a little while, like to walk a mile in my shoes. It was, and there's still resentment from that because I see the same kinds of things happening today. The precursor to everything boiling over, and I'm not, I mean, quite frankly, just to wax philosophic for a minute, I see the same things happening again. At
Say more
times,
about that.
yeah, I see the same things happening over and over, and I think that it's going to be the death of America as we know it. And I'm, and I base that on what I've seen, and not what I read or what somebody told me, but what I've seen. I've seen the conditions, and there's the old saying, and I'm sure you're familiar with those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it. Well, if you read the history of the Second World War, and you read about what was happening in Germany and Europe prior to the Hitler invading
Poland.
Poland and Czechoslovakia, and it was the same kind of conditions happening, the same kind of lies and half truths, and the same kind of nonchalance by the people, everyday people. It was. I'm always interested in reviewing history in one way or the other. I don't read as much as I used to read 2 or 3 books a week, but I for some reason I don't read that much anymore. But I like film, and I watched Churchill again the other night, which was great. Gary Oldman is one of my favorite actors. He's pretty good. But that was a good movie. But it just rekindled my interest in what was happening at the time, and how for people just didn't take it seriously. Now we're at a juncture now in our history where nobody knows what's going to happen, But I always refer to music, but in the words of Mahalia Jackson, soon I'll be through with the troubles of this world, man. It's like I don't mind crossing over, but usually when you cross over, you want to leave the world in a better place than you left it, than you found it. But I've seen it go from bad to not so bad to pretty good, then start to deteriorate back into the same. I don't see how people can be so stupid as to not understand.
Yeah, I empathize with your perspective and sharing the frustration, and I get it. Now, I'm gonna shift gears a little bit and just ask you, what was your first job in radio, and what was it like?
My first job was as a volunteer at WEAA in Baltimore, at Morgan State University. I was a member of the Left Bank Jazz Society, which is one of the most oldest and most prestigious jazz societies in the world. And but I joined when I lived in Baltimore, and the Left Bank used to have a radio program every Sunday, I think, and periodically different members of the group would get a chance to host the program. The Morgan State would train you and everything. Anyhow, so I it's all is, and I had a lot of music, so I wanted to try it. So I tried a couple of times, and then I went to the station manager and told him he needed to give me a program of my own because just once in a while I wasn't going to do it. So he gave me a time slot from 12 midnight Sunday to 8 a.m. Monday morning. So that gave me just enough time to go home and get dressed, to get changed for my real job. So that's how I got started. And when I moved back to Savannah, after I found out Savannah State had a radio station, the first thing I did was to come out here and volunteer for the radio station.
Do you remember what year you started at WEAA?
I think I know I left in '88. I was there probably maybe a year or two, because I left kind of abruptly. I was going through some personal things as well before I moved back home. But I think it was 80. I know I moved back here in '88, so it was either '87 or '88 and '88. But yeah.
So when you started at WEAA, you were also working at Hubline, and you were working nights in the radio station, and then going to your day job at Hubline.
Yeah. Initially, then me and Hubline had a falling out, and that's when I decided to move back home.
And Hubline had you traveling a little bit, right? You're seeing other parts of the country.
I travel all over the country. Every time there was, any black organization that had a convention or anything, more often than not, I was there, for the show. And I used to always take my little tape player with me and play music at the booth that we would have. And I got to meet a lot of people like that. In fact, with Hubline, I was in Paradise Island in Nassau and Bahamas, and I met Muhammad Ali. I was getting ready to go play golf, and waiting for the bus to take me to the golf course, and he came out. So I said, "Champ," and I stuck out my hand for him to shake it. He said, "Now wait a minute," and he went in his pocket and pulled out a coin, and he closed his hand and opened it up. There's a penny. It turned to a quarter, another coin. Then he closed his hand, opened again. It was a gold coin. Then he closed his hand, opened again, and it was the penny again. So he loved magic, and then he shook my hand. But that was something else. But that was because of Hubline. Yeah, that I got to meet the great Muhammad Ali, and so I've gone to I've been to California, to Chicago, Columbus, Ohio. We go everywhere, man. Florida, down at Inverness Golf Course. The people in the liquor industry like to play golf, and so we would always go to golf courses.
That's great. Tell me a bit more about Morgan State and what it meant to you to work in HBCU radio.
Well, first of all, it was great because I got to play what I wanted to play. We didn't have playlists.
You had control over your programming.
Over my program, and I started doing this program called Impressions, which was a program that I brought to Savannah State when I moved out here. But yeah, I enjoyed. Man, it was great, and then I used to get a lot of feedback from the community, because being in the liquor business, I would naturally visit clubs and stuff, and somebody would always tell me that they heard the program and that they liked it, and that made me feel good.
Was it a straight jazz format?
Oh yeah, I would just a precursor to that. Actually, I had this friend Fred Grant whose aunt had a club, and his cousin Stanley used to play music in the club, and he was set up on Wednesday nights. He would have set up his music, and he would come in and play. So I went in, and they knew I liked the music. He asked me if I wanted to play one, and I said yeah, and then they started asking me back to play, and that's how I got. And I found out that I could program music that people liked. I could touch people with the programming. And so when I got to Morgan State, I just had to learn how to run the board and all that stuff. But as far as doing the music, that came naturally.
And what was different about Morgan State compared to Howard?
Morgan State was Howard. Howard was kind of snooty. Howard was more sophisticated than Morgan at that time. Anyhow, even though Morgan was an outstanding school, and we used to play them football every year. They used to beat the hell out of Howard every year, man. They whipping every year. So, but it was different. I found out one thing about Morgan and Baltimore in general. People in Baltimore had the most thorough understanding of the music. I mean, they really knew the music, and they really appreciated the music. Not that people in D.C. didn't, but Baltimore. I'd never been in an environment where people actually knew the music. That's why the Left Bank Jazz Society used to have a major conference, a major concert every Sunday with major artists, and it was like $10 to get in, and you could bring your own food and your own bottle, and but it was $10 to get in, and you could stay to all the sets. But the musicians in New York used to love to come down because the people appreciated the music so much. And they knew that when they were getting applause and raise from those people, they knew they had really done something, because they really loved the music and knew the music. That's one of the differences in is that they knew the music. And Baltimore had a big history in the music, and it was because of the Left Bank Jazz Society, which is in fact, I think they had a branch in D.C. I was a member of the Baltimore Left Bank, though.
How long were you a member of the Left Bank Jazz Society?
From the time probably about a year, because it all coincided with the time that I was in the process of moving down back to Savannah, shutting down my life in Maryland, D.C., and moving back to Savannah.
What made you want to move back to Savannah?
Well, I had problems with. I had marital problems.
You were married in Baltimore?
Yeah, I was married. In fact, I was married 3 times. I got married again when I moved back home.
Can you tell me when you first got married?
When I was 20 years old, and my wife was 18, and we had a daughter, and I went in the Air Force, and the big plan was I would go in the Air Force, and when I got out, she'd be finished with school, and I would finish. But the best laid plans of mice and men, as you know.
What's your daughter's name?
Kelly. She is a librarian. Now, she also graduated from Howard, as did my youngest daughter, April. We were divorced, I guess, for maybe 5 years, and then I got married again in D.C. And my second wife and I had a daughter as well, April, and she's an entertainer. She dances, she sings. Now she works at Howard at the School of Fine Arts. She works for Felicia Rashad, and so they have both of them they're both very talented young women, smart, and they both graduated from Howard.
Okay, so you got divorced, and when you were living in Baltimore, and was that the impetus to get to Savannah?
Yeah, I moved back because my mother had opened a florist, and I was going to come back here and help her run the florist. And once again, you know, a mother's sons are not supposed to work for their mothers, who are dominating and never think that the sons are older. So I was volunteering at Savannah State, doing 2 shows a week, and
What were those shows called? You said you brought the Impressions show.
yeah, Impressions is that's the show with so-called jazz, and then I also do Nothing But the Blues, and I do a program. My wife used to do a program called Jazz by Popular Demand, and I took that over for a student who was doing the program, and she passed away, and I was just trying to keep her program alive.
At that time, she passed away.
Yeah, she
Oh.
passed away. Well, and then I was also doing a show called what was it called? Did I say Masters of the Art? Masters of the Art, which is a show that featured a specific artist every week, and also started doing a show called Outside the Box, which gave another perspective on so-called jazz from a more avant-garde. Like I enjoy doing that because I got to play musicians that I wouldn't play on Impressions, because there was another audience, and everybody doesn't like out music, and I love it.
How long were you working as a volunteer programmer here at the station before you became manager?
I think maybe a year and a half, or maybe 2. But because I was still working at the floors with my mother. But
And who was the manager of the station when you started volunteering?
Carol Gordon, and she was here when I came, and her husband worked for the post office, and he was getting transferred to Jacksonville. She decided she was going to move with him, and they had to find somebody else. So so who better than me? I'd learned all of the stuff about programming, and programming, nobody can. You either have that or you don't, if you're a good programmer. But I learned how to do the boards, how to do the station breaks. I learned about FCC regulations, and so I already had that knowledge, and all I had to do was get the job. And they gave me Dr. George Reed was the vice president for academic affairs at the time, and the radio station always reported to the provost, vice president for academic affairs. So Dr. Reed, he gave me the job temporarily, and that's all they had to do. When I got in temporarily, I knocked them out. I mean, and I don't say that trying to brag or anything, but I knew that I could play good music. I had good managerial skills based on working for Hugh Blind, because while I was at Hugh Blind, I became a district manager for Maryland, Delaware, and D.C. So I had all of the prerequisites, in a practical sense, because I was really managing 3 states for Hugh Blind. So I had that part of it, and I got the other technical skills from Morgan State, and so I came out, and I joined it. But prior to coming, getting the job at the radio station, I was a member of the Coastal Jazz Association, and we used to produce the annual Savannah Jazz Festival. And I became president of I was president of Coastal Jazz for I think 10 years, and so once again, that was a trip at first too, because people did not. Once again, they did not know me. They didn't know, and I don't mean to brag or anything, but I mean the truth is the light. I had a vast knowledge of the music, gained on practical experience. It wasn't not reading a lot of books or a lot of other people's opinions. So.
Well, what was the most challenging part of the job as a leader of a station?
Well, first of all, it was a college station. Had a lot of students, and in fact, we had a much larger personnel roster from students at that time, and of course, they all wanted to play what they wanted to play, and I was more inclined to try to do something that was more educational.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that our format is predicated on music of this hemisphere, African influenced music of the hemisphere, so-called blues, gospel, so-called jazz, Latin music. In fact, we started when I became the station manager. We did the first Spanish language broadcast in Savannah, in this area. Reggae, well, they were doing reggae before I got here, because Ras Anif was here long before me. And it's hard to convince young people that something that has value, and I try to have them understand that what they should be doing was availing themselves of the opportunity to learn, because this is a part of the history, that's not normally taught in a lot of places, and they could get a much better historical view of the music and how it's all interconnected with each other. It's the blues, it's the so-called jazz, it's the gospel, which is a combination of blues, so-called jazz, and spirituals, and musical black church, and then Latin music. I had a problem, actually, when I first started broadcasting Latin music. I used to have black people calling me up, say I shouldn't be playing that music, because I had one lady that called me up and said, well, they're saying that they're the second largest, they're the largest minority in the country. I said, well, they are, that's the truth, but they were focused on other stuff, and not, like a lot of times people get sidetracked because rather than see the similarities, they see the differences. And when you listen to the music, you can always find the similarities in the music, and because it's there. It's impossible to separate it. It's there, So I had people who didn't appreciate that, but I didn't care. I thought that we were on the right track, and eventually we did. I used to get a lot of correspondence from people. During the course of my time here, we used to get, after we started streaming on the web, we used to get correspondence from Europe, from Eastern Europe, Western Europe at the time. I got correspondence from Russia. All over the world, people were picking us up, and I knew I was doing something right, and it wasn't all me, because our station really was a volunteer station. All of the people who volunteered helped to make the station what it was. We had actually a sort of a picture of what our programming was. We had Latin programmers. We had, of course, the reggae. We had, and it has always had, it was very interracial. We had community volunteers, which is, they used to do all of the nighttime, and we had community volunteers. We had about 25 volunteers, community volunteers, who took ownership in the station and what we were doing. I'm so proud of what they did. It's It's amazing.
How would you describe the relationship during your time as manager with the community? Not just the volunteers, but how did the station serve the community? What was its place within this community?
Well, I think we always did PSA public service announcements.
Tell me about those.
We announced in Savannah in the South, you had to be associated with the church if you want, the black church, if you're going to be successful. So we used to do church announcements. We used to do national public service announcements for any nonprofit entity that would say, and they used to send us, programs all the time to be incorporated into our public service announcements. We had community-based programs. We used to have an environmental show about black environmentalists and how environmental issues really affect the African American community. They don't know hardly anything about it. But we had Dr. Mildred McLean, who was she was big into the very she understood the whole spectrum of that environmental the environmental aspect of so that was something, and I loved it because it was something that African Americans were not aware of, and how actually that affected them more than a lot of other ethnicities. So yeah, and when we used to do programs from the school, from professors. In fact, I just saw Dr. He's a Muslim, but he's from Africa. Mukhtar, Dr. Mukhtar, and we used to do programs on Ramadan. I tried to make it educational.
So non-music, but so more of a social commentary, public affairs.
Yes, yeah, we did that.
Did you do black? Didn't you do? I heard from another student, DJ, that you did sort of Black History Month.
Yeah,
presentations.
we used to celebrate Black History Month by doing those programs throughout the month, and at first I used to spend money out of my pocket to buy those programs. We used to buy them from, we used to get a lot of programs. We got a lot of programs from Pacifica Radio, which is my model, really.
Left independent radio.
PFW, WPFW in D.C. was a station I listened to all the time. And
good jazz station.
Yeah, yeah. But
Jazz and Justice.
They used to have a really good selection of different programs for different segments of the community, and there was this guy named not Oliver Cromwell, but what is his name? His name is Cromwell. Last name Art Cromwell, and he was my perfect example of a good programmer. He influenced me more than anybody as far as incorporating the way he did his programs. And once again, at PFW, they had some everything, man. They had programs for everybody, all aspects of the community, all ethnicities, all sexual orientation. They used to have, I loved it. So I tried to do that with WHCJ for as much as possible.
So that was a model.
Yeah, that was a model. So I'm not gonna sit here and say I had all of the ideas, but I had some things that I wanted to do. But I mean, they showed me that it could be done.
Okay, I'm gonna move us towards the end of the interview, but I want you to take a little bit of time to reflect on what it means to you to do HBCU radio, to do black radio on an HBCU campus. How did it change your life? How did it impact your life?
Well, basically, I think the biggest way was that I have basically been a shy person all my life, and radio gave me, black radio gave me a way to come out and speak about issues that concern me, and not have a problem with. So I also like the thought of sharing with the community what was ours, and to let the community know that this is ours. You don't have any business being ashamed of it, or it's ours. And it's not to say we have such an exclusive right to it that other people can't deal with it, but I believe in the truth, and I believe the truth should be told about our culture, and that's always been what I try to do. I've lectured in schools, elementary schools. Lectured on campus in some of the classes, not to the extent that I would have hoped, but some of the instructors, like Dr. Chambers, used to always invite me to his class to talk about the history of this music, and some others. But I just I thought that it was a good way to address issues that I had not addressed in the past. I have not been able to address, and on a grander scale than I could have just trying to write a letter to the editor or something. I think that's the major thing that I enjoyed is that I felt a lot for is sharing with the community, sharing with the campus community, sharing with the students, and basically sharing with the students, because we never restricted our membership of the station to mass communication students. We always took students from all disciplines.
And what do you see as your legacy at this station? What do you want that to be?
Well, I just wanted to be that I made a contribution. That I made a contribution to growing the station. I knew, and I really don't like to brag, and I always give credit where it's due, man, to, the volunteers who have been the lifeblood of the station forever. But I think that I made a difference. When I came here, WHCJ was a 6,000 watt station, and the signal didn't reach all over Savannah. Since I was here, I was able to get a grant to put that antenna out there, a grant that allowed us to expand the equipment to get this building, because we used to be stationed in a dormitory. The dormitory, this new dorm over here to my left, replaced Wright Hall. That's where we were. We had 2 rooms in Wright Hall, and we were broadcasting 8 hours a day, and dark on the weekends. So during my tenure, first thing I wanted to do was expand the broadcast hours. So as soon as we were technically available to do it, able to do it, we started broadcasting 24 hours. So we went from 8 hours a day to 24 hours a day. And
how did the reach of the station change over your time?
We the new antenna, we were getting out to 95, a little beyond. In fact, going north, we used to be able to reach Beaufort. We still get some parts of South Carolina, and believe me, over the years, people have let me know personally, and Grace has a whole file of letters that people sent in about what the station has meant to them and appreciation of the station. Letters from politicians. In fact, one of them is running for office again, I think for judge, Tom Bordeaux. He sent me a really nice letter when we first started. This was when we were in the dormitory over there. we did an interview with Max Cleland. I don't know if you remember Max Cleland. Well, he was a congressman. I think he got to be Congress, but he was a Vietnam War veteran. He lost both legs and his arm, but he was an amazing story. You know, we've introduced, interviewed Roxanne Shante, who's one of the pioneers of hip hop. We interviewed Susan Taylor, who was the Essence editor of Essence magazine. We have in fact, we did the first interview with John Barron, who wrote Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. We did the first media interview with him in the country.
It's a book set in Savannah.
Yeah. So I'm proud. I'm proud of what we did, what we have done, what we continue to do, even though we're kind of hampered now with some of the things. But
and your successor is Grace Curry, who you just mentioned her name.
Yeah.
How do you feel about how she's led this station since you've left it?
Oh, I left it in good hands because I trained Grace. I hired her, and but not without. She got a lot of ability. Yes, now taking credit for her ability, but I saw something in her, and she didn't prove me wrong. Grace is Grace got to be my right arm, my left arm, everything. She is, as we say, she's the truth. She's the real deal. And I adopted her because she's like a surrogate daughter. In fact, I know some guy, a writer came in to do a interview for a local newspaper, and I was telling him about how Grace was a surrogate daughter, and he put in the article that Grace was my daughter. And the new president at the time called me over and said, you can't have nepotism. You can't have your daughter. Well, I said, chill. She's just my surrogate daughter. But I love Grace like a daughter. My daughters know that I love her like a daughter. But she's Grace is serious, and that's what. And she's so competent, So I'm yeah.
You're proud.
Yeah.
Second to last question. So, we at the HBCU Radio Preservation Project are trying to record this history of HBCU radio. What do you think about us doing this work, and why does it matter? Why is it important?
I think it's very important. I think it's more important than you realize, because today when there are entities, political entities that are striving and trying to eliminate and eradicate our history, this is one of the things. You can't eradicate history unless somebody lets you do it. But when people are starting to say that some politicians, like those Nazis in Florida, and I mean that sincerely, fascists. I don't think that. But anyhow, I just I think that it's so important, because if not you, who? Maybe somebody needs to do it. I'm in the process now of doing my memoirs, and I'm working with a writer who we have taped many interviews, over 2 years of interviews, and he's now compiling it into written form. But I just think it's too important not to do. And with me, I'm doing it on history of the music, and I think that is too important to leave to the device and to the whims of others. It's too important. If you don't control your history, now our history was always oral, for the most part. But then now the books have been written, but there's still, I think, the true history is that history that's passed on from generation to generation. because nobody can change that, unless you change it. And so yeah, history is always important to me, and I think that that's one of the things that one of the major things that I have tried to accomplish is to keep a historical record orally of what our history is. I do. I'm proud of that. I'm very proud of that, and I know other people who I know well have told me that and complimented that. And I always tell them it's not just me; it's all of the volunteers who came to this radio station and gave their time and effort. All of them, and without them, we couldn't have done it.
Well, thank you. And of course, we haven't been able to get to your full story in all of your 83 years, but is there anything that we haven't talked about, or a person that we haven't mentioned, a place, a time that you want to make sure gets on the record here before we close this interview?
Yeah, I want to mention specifically some of the people in the administration that have helped the radio station. Dr. Joseph A. Silver, who used to be the Vice President for Academic Affairs and the Provost. Dr. Silver was here, I think he came in 92, I'm not sure. But I saw, when I came to Savannah State, it was kind of in a period of flux because the president had just died. One of the president of the university had just died. But anyhow, so they had some turmoil and in the administration. But I saw this institution make more progress under Dr. Silver than anybody else in its tenure. I mean, I'll take that to the bank. And the school started to go down a little bit when he left. And he didn't leave voluntarily. Some of the faculty and people. Anyhow, I don't need to get into all of that because it's other people outside of his administration who caused his downfall. But he still, he left here and became president of Alabama A&M, and then he's now he's running his own consulting firm. And but Dr. Silver, Hanif, Marty Foley has been one of the greatest attributes of the station. Marty, all the years that he's been an engineer of the station, he never raised the price, not once. And anytime you're on call, night or day, Marty is once again Marty is the truth, and he's always give a bow to him, but mostly to the people on campus. And I'm not going to be able to remember all of them, but we had a lot of support on campus. We also had people who were constantly trying to undermine what we tried to do, but then I guess you have that anywhere you go. But like I used to tell Grace all the time, we'll be all right. And if they want to fight us, let them make fools of themselves, because we have survived because we're doing it right. And that's what I believe in here.
Well, Theron Ike Carter, I really appreciate your time and the stories that you've told us for this project. This is invaluable, and I want to wish you well on your future endeavors, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for coming in, and thank you for doing this, because I do think it's important. And if I leave out anything, don't feel free to call me, and I can always, fill in you, so to speak.
Thank you. Will do. All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.